Great to see you again, Debbie. We're checking in a year later, see how your first year has gone at N5. We're going to talk about industrial IoT and next generation sensors that will hopefully solve climate change. First, I want to give a quick shout out. Stephen Chen, thank you for getting me to Abhishek. Abhishek, thank you for trusting me with this search. So Blue Ventures, the N5 team, thank you again. For those who haven't heard your story yet, Debbie, I wanted you to just share briefly how you got to now. And we got a bunch to cover today, but we wanted to hear your story first.
Okay, yeah, great. So I've actually spent 30 years in gas detection and developing sensor technology. In that time, I've worked in some big companies and some small companies. And, really my whole career has been about building products that can make a difference in people's lives. That's what drives me, along with making money for founders and employees, because that's also an important driver. If there's no money, it's probably not worth doing. And so, yeah, at this point, I consider myself a serial entrepreneur, having left the cozy big company world for the second time to go back to a startup and try to build something great.
That's what caught my attention. I did want to give a quick shout out to Abhishek as well before we start. Maryland's top emerging tech company for 2022. It's an incredible win for the whole team, so congrats there. But that really caught my attention with you, Debbie, over a year. We first spoke in January 2021, and you had taken Syncera through to exit with IDT, and IDT then sold to Renesas, and you had really 4 years of planned payouts and very cushy guarantees. What made you first want to take that call about startups again?
Well, at the end, I always love sensor technology, and I'm always open to talking to people about understanding what new technologies are out there, what new approaches to sensing people are working on, what new innovations are out there. And to be candid, during our first calls, I was weighing 50-50. Maybe this is a technology that I should bring to Renesas to be interested in. That was absolutely part of my motivation, was looking out for new technologies that could be beneficial to Renesas. As the time went on, I decided to take it as an opportunity for myself instead.
Yes. So, I mean, we've all heard hardware is hard. So what do you feel like, compared to other software startups, what's N5's secret sauce in your view?
So I think there's two things. One is the IP. So to do hardware and to do it well, you have to have a real honest to goodness basis to build on. There has to be something of value there. But once you've got that piece, it all comes down to team and execution. And I think one of the things that Abhishek has done incredibly well is hire and retain top talent to build on this IP and turn it from, a lab curiosity into something that we can actually use in the real world.
That's great. So what are you most proud of in the last 12 months? What do you feel like is some of the highlights in the last 12 months for you?
So I still remember the first time I went out to Rockville after they'd hired me, and we were sitting in a conference room talking about the maturity of different sensors and different projects they were working on. And they mentioned that they'd been out in California a month or two before to do a test of a wildfire detection system. And living in Colorado, unfortunately, I've had my share of literally seeing fire from my back porch. I've never been personally affected, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But I knew that I suspected that there could be a large market for a ground-based sensor. So in less than a year, we took that proof of concept. We did the market research to see if this was something that people would buy and use. And we are now delivering what we call N5 Shield, which is IoT sensors for the first generation of IoT sensors for the detection of wildfire and air quality, which is just an incredible level of execution by the team. I can't speak highly enough of what they've accomplished.
That's fantastic. I saw you on the Denver news too. Tell us about that early wildfire detection. You're on the news officially. So tell us what some other exciting things happening from.
Yeah, so that we were working with Gilpin County. It's a county west of Denver. They've been one of our early adopters. We've learned so much from working with them about requirements and what it would take to be successful in the field. And we were working up there on a prescribed burn. as we've done in a couple of locations. And this particular one, after being put out, those piles do smolder for a while, all under control. Nobody was ever in danger from it, but we had left some sensors to monitor the air quality. And we saw one evening that one of the piles flared up. And so 36 minutes before a 911 caller happened by, we were able to detect the fire with our system. I was able to call. We didn't have any automated notifications set up yet. So I literally texted and called the emergency managers down there and said, there's a red dot on your dashboard. I'm not sure what's going on, but we should look into this. And it was the flames actually that our system was able to detect. That came about 6 weeks after the Marshall fire. And I will tell you, I was absolutely shaking as I made that call and saw that their sensors were doing what they were designed to do.
It's coming. It's real. I love it. So let's say hypothetically, N5 sensors just blanketed all the most fire-prone areas of Colorado next year, the year after. Have there been any studies on like the response time and course of fire season and how cutting down on response time? Just any relevant numbers or math you all been able to do so far?
Yeah, and so this is such an evolving area. It's really hard to put real numbers on it. One challenge is that climate change is making fires burn hotter and faster than they ever have been before. So you'll hear that a lot from firefighters that, firefighting in 2021 and 22 is nothing like it was 10 years ago. And of course, ground-based sensors are pretty new as well. But to give a couple of proof points on what we think we can achieve with this technology, one in the US, most fires are still found when somebody calls 911. And that's such a variable thing, how long it's going to take somebody to see the fire, what kind of information they're going to give. So we've got one proof point from the prescribed burns, where we actually could have provided had that been a real uncontrolled fire, we could have provided 36 minutes of advanced notice, which is an absolute lifetime in terms of actually getting people on the fire to contain it, as well as warn people about evacuations if that's what's necessary. Another piece of data, if you look at the Marshall fire that happened at the end of 2021 in Colorado, that was found by a 911 caller. It only took 4 minutes to get on scene after that happened. The fire department, obviously does an incredible job there. But with all the smoke and the confusion and the inaccurate data, it took them 11 minutes to actually find where the fire was, because all they had was a 911 caller saying, I see smoke. And there were actually multiple fires that day, which nobody talks about. They only talk about the Marshall fire, which is the one that got out of control. So of course, with the insane winds that happened that day, I don't want to make any claims that we could have prevented something like the tragedy that did occur. But if we can save time, if we can allow firefighters to do their jobs more efficiently, which they already do a great job, but if we can get them the data so that they can be more efficient, we do have the opportunity to save property and save lives.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's really one of the big promises, right, of climate tech is automation and accuracy and data that saves lives. Well, what are you seeing more broadly in the market of climate tech that makes you hopeful?
Yeah, I think this is such an exciting time for sensor maturity, as well as other components in the ecosystem, because sensors are great, but you've got to have power and you've got to have communication. So there's so much innovation happening across the supply chain that we're really seeing sensors being brought to the fore to make a benefit. And one thing that I like to say, it's hard to improve what you can't measure. When you've got data, that's when you can look to how do we make this better. Without data, you're just guessing about how to spend resources, and you may not be doing that as efficiently as you hope.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the most limiting factors you think right now in the adoption of N5 tech?
Well, for N5 specifically, I think it's two things. One is we're working on an entirely new technology. So part of the fun and the challenge of my job is going out and to talk to people about something that they never knew existed. I've had customers tell me that they literally had dreamed about something existing and wishing somebody would have this technology. But it is new, and selling new things is hard. You've got to find early adopters who are willing to take a chance on something that hasn't been out there before. And they're out there, but that's definitely one of the challenges, is identifying and working with early adopters.
Right.
The second is it's 2022, so this is a really hard time to be bringing new new products to the market for anybody, whether you're a startup or an established
Right.
company.
It is hard. Yeah. How have y'all navigated some of these supply chain constraints, and yeah, how have y'all navigated that?
Um, Definitely a little bit of luck, but I would say also just working closely with our suppliers.
Yeah.
It puts more importance on planning than we've ever had, than I've ever experienced in my career. But putting our most honest plans together, and then finding our suppliers, and I like to treat suppliers as partners. Working with them closely to
Yeah.
find products sometimes hidden under rocks, it seems like, but to find what we need to build our devices.
That's great. That's great. Who would you say are your ideal pilot partners right now, or the profile of an ideal pilot partner?
Yeah, so the profile of the ideal partner, it's somebody who has been impacted by fire. And a lot of people think about fire and they think California, but if you look across the map of the US, there was only one state that didn't have a single wildfire in 2021. That was Delaware. District of Columbia didn't have any either. So wildfire is actually really widespread
Right.
throughout the West, the Midwest.
Hmm.
And so, it's somebody that has the potential to be impacted about fire, who's looking for ways to spend their resources efficiently, and is willing to engage, is
Yeah.
willing to work with partners to bring new technology to the
Yeah.
fruition. So yes, we're working in California, but I think there's a lot of opportunities in other states who haven't had the publicity that California
Right.
has. And to be fair, California does have a bigger problem than anybody else. But that doesn't change the fact that a lot of other
Yeah.
states have wildfires to deal with as well.
Now, briefly describe how Department of Homeland is going to help pay for some of this. I didn't quite catch all of that with Homeland paying for these early pilots.
Yeah, so we've been funded by the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Innovation. They have a smart labs where they're looking to bring technology out of the labs and into production. So they've paid for 100 sensors, and we're working with DHS and stakeholders in a variety of Western states to find locations where those sensors can be deployed as part of a test program, so we can create the case studies
Right.
that will help to drive adoption of the technology.
That's a huge validation point. The fact that the Department of Homeland's behind you on this. That's
It
huge.
is. It is. It's been a multi-phase program where we had to prove that the sensors worked first in the lab, and then we had to prove that they worked in a controlled test in California last summer. But we are one of two vendors that made it through that, all of that validation, and now we are, like I said, being funded to actually put these in the field and prove they work.
That's great. So let's fast forward 5 years. What would great look like for your team?
So, I think what we're seeing will be much broader adoption of environmental sensors and gas sensors specifically.
Mhm.
So if you look, I like to talk about the GPS. So, a lot of years ago, that was a really special technology. The government used it, some industry used it. It was really expensive and special. And now
Big,
you can
right?
buy and big.
Big.
And now you can buy a phone or a watch. I mean, it's everywhere. It's inexpensive.
Right.
And so that's a lot of maturity on the underlying sensor technology. But what happens as the sensor technology matures and becomes more available and more affordable, all of a sudden, all these wildly different use cases start to crop up, because now you've got this tool, which you didn't have before. So environmental sensors and gas sensors have badly lagged other physical sensors. But
Right.
I think the next 5 years are going to be where we start to see these sensors take their place in making meaningful data
Right.
available.
So ubiquitous embedded sensors that are a fraction of the size and cost is the hope,
That's the
right?
dream.
So many moving parts in IoT, especially industrial IoT, climate IoT. What next generation sensors? Why are next generation sensors so essential in the promise of making IoT? I mean, everyone's seen the Gartner reports about all these billions of new devices, and we haven't quite gotten there. I think we're coming out of the trough of disillusionment, hopefully. But why are next generation sensors so key in making the promise of industrial IoT real?
Yeah, speaking specifically about gas and environmental sensors, it's hard. Other sensor suppliers get to seal off their sensors so they're not affected by the environment. But the fundamental challenge of making an environmental sensors is you're sensing the environment. So you have to be accessible to the environment. And I think some of the early companies in the space have made great strides in making affordable and reliable sensors and proving that it can be done. Now there are additional hurdles to solve in terms of sensitivity and selectivity so that we're giving information which is nuanced enough to really drive good decision making. So there's a lot of need left for innovation in environmental sensing to get the right data at the right place in the right time.
What about the product roadmap for the next 5 years? What are you excited about?
So, right now it's wildfire detection and we're going to build that out. There's a whole host of features that our customers have asked for that we'll be adding to the N5 Shield platform to make that even more valuable to their efforts. From there, air quality, of course, fires don't just destroy property. They also do really bad things for air quality. So moving into environmental air quality is a natural next step. And then leveraging the long history of the work the company's done around chemical threat detection to also add detection of chemicals, whether that's from an accidental spill type of situation or a more nefarious effort to bring some nasty chemicals and use them against our population. We'll be adding all of those to N5 Shield, as well as moving into portable and wearable sensors.
That's great. So I'm on the talent side. What do you see as the biggest talent challenge in this space?
So I've been fortunate to, in both companies I've worked for, had some amazing engineers working for me. And what you really need are people who are smart and who understand the technology and get the technology, but are also good communicators and can be practical enough to find that good enough point where you move it out of the lab and into production. So finding those three things wrapped up in one person, and or taking a young engineer and mentoring them to be able to do those things is really challenging. But when you can deliver people that have those skills or can learn those skills, like I said, that's just huge, because that's what makes companies success.
So when you think about this nano environmental sensor, those who want to get into it, who want to get into this next generation of sensor tech, how would they go about that? How would they follow in your footsteps, or what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so there's, education is always an important part of it. Getting your degree. There's so many exciting things happening around artificial intelligence and machine learning that N5 and other companies are starting to leverage. So whether you're studying chemistry or artificial intelligence or electrical engineering, but get a technical degree. That's always my first word of advice. Go for the STEM degrees, because you can create so much value with those degrees. Look for opportunities for internships, go to conferences, talk to people, and then just do it. Just start somewhere and do it and do a great job, and you'll have fun and I think be well rewarded for having that fun.
That's great. So last question for you. What would you say to other founders who are at these name brand global Fortune 5000s that are thinking about a startup switch? What would you tell them?
You've got to do your diligence and make sure that there is something real behind where you're thinking of going. That's both technical diligence, that underlying technology is sound, a little bit of market diligence, that the market wants what you're going to try to do. But if you can identify an opportunity where those two things are true, and you can either build a team or find a team like Abhishek had already created to join into, it's well worth it. It's a lot of fun to work in a company like this and be able to build the company and the products of the future.
That's great. Were there any other stories you wanted to share before we sign off? Any other highlights of the last year?
Wow. I can't say about the amazing team. I've been fortunate throughout my career to be able to hire and work with amazing people. But N5, people talk a lot about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. but when it's built naturally, because you have people coming from different places, different environments, different backgrounds, coming into a company to pursue a common goal, when you have that, it's really special and powerful.
Yeah.
So I've met a whole bunch of new people with different backgrounds than I've ever worked with before. And I treasure those relationships. And I also treasure, what we're doing together to make something special.
That's fantastic. I hope to see a lot more in the news this next year, saving the world from wildfires. And yeah, I'm excited to see what comes next. Thank you again for joining. Anyone watching, of course, you can follow N5 Sensors. You can follow Debbie. They'll be putting out a lot more announcements in the next year with some of these early pilot partners. But yeah, thank you for taking the time, and look forward to talking more.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Great. Thanks. Cheers.
Bye.